Nice, good to see you. Nice to
Take
meet you.
care.
Enjoyed your talk. We're kind of touching on similar topics.
Okay.
Virtual public people.
All right, well, maybe we get
Yeah, no. I mean, like, I'm not talking about.
Yeah. We did. Yeah. It's construction.
Oh, really? Oh, that's good. I didn't think it's- that's good. Exactly.
Well, sounds. I think it works like a quarter.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, Tuesday watches.
Hello. Hello. Got a question. Ian, are you there?
Sure.
Yeah. Are you there? Oh, really? In the environmental burn, what did you see? The owls. It's gonna be the owls, right? It's not. Looks like. Oh,
There it is,
damn,
right there.
it was.
Turn it back on. Okay, we're good.
No, we're good. We're good. Okay. Okay. Thank you. All right. Bye.
Okay, we're ready to start the 350 presentation. My name is Terry Combs with Crime AE Group. Today we're going to be hearing from Connor Oullette about the New Era Environmental Justice Implementation. Connor is a graduate from the University of Kentucky with a degree in geography, heavily focused in geospatial engineering and earth sciences.
Thank you, everybody, for being patient as we work out the technical difficulties. That's inevitable. But we'll go ahead and get started and kind of jump through this since we're running a little bit behind. I'm here today to talk about environmental justice and CAFID's new approach. Not really all that new, but updated. Just a quick overview of what I'm going to talk about, our purpose and goal, overview of NEPA and its role in the EJ process, practices and methodologies for determining EJ populations. I'll go briefly over the KYTC Bridge Data Miner, which is our new analysis tool, preliminary analysis tool. And lastly, we'll go over impacts, adverse and disproportionately high and adverse. So our purpose and goal, our main purpose is to increase the consideration as well as the engagement of any EJ populations within the project area. DEA has a unique role in terms of what we're involved in. We are pretty much involved from the outset of the project all the way through planning, design, and into construction. So we really play a key role throughout the whole process. And what we really want to stress in terms of EJ analysis and our EJ guidance is to have meaningful engagement with any potential EJ populations. Our goal is to provide KYTC and our consultant staff with a better understanding of the environmental and economic challenges faced by potential EJ populations in our project area, our impacted project area. We'll also go over procedures and methodologies. NEPA is a procedural statute released by the EPA with two main goals: to promote informed decision-making and to inform the public about our decision-making process. Our mission statement is KYTC shall make achieving environmental justice part of its mission by identifying and addressing, as appropriate, disproportionately high and adverse human health or environmental effects of its programs, policies, and activities on minority and low-income populations. I'll talk more about what disproportionately high and adverse human health or environmental effects are a little later in the presentation. This is a poorly constructed flow chart. Again, from the outset of the project, meaningful engagement is something we really want to drive home. We want to build relationships with the communities as well as local officials. So we start off with meaningful engagement. We move into our scoping process, all of our alternates that we may or may not be looking at. And we rely heavily on the public to provide feedback at this stage, as well as through the entire project. So we really want to stress that the more community cohesion and information you can provide is going to pay out dividends throughout the entire project. Once we scope and select our alternative, we're going to identify any potential EJ population with a preliminary analysis tool, which is the bridge data miner that we'll be looking at. After we've identified any potential populations, look at the impacts. What are the impacts going to be? Are those impacts going to be high, disproportionately high and adverse? And then we look at mitigation and monitoring, not just up to construction, but throughout the entirety of the project. Again, this is just a brief overview of what meaningful engagement should be. We want, again, to stress early and often. So as early in the process as possible, we want to get comments back from the public, from officials, from anybody, MPOs, anybody. We want to use more effective public outreach tools to inform the community. It used to be just newspaper ads, billboards, that kind of thing. We want to try and implement more social media, other different applications in order to get more feedback and more comments from the community. We want to ensure that public is participating and, again, create adaptive and innovative approaches. Each project is different. There's no one size fits all, especially with socioeconomics and environmental justice. Then we go into our scoping phase. This phase of the project includes the scoping of the project and the selection of the preferred alternate. This is where we make a determination of the affected environment. We begin to make a determination. We consider our data sources and methodologies. Of course, we want to be using reputable sources, any government entity. This is where this really frames the impact analysis for the proposed project. If we have to do a socioeconomic baseline, do that. We can also do a separate environmental justice document as well. So when we identify any affected EJ populations, the most important thing is, again, reaching out to the community and getting feedback. It's really hard to determine exactly who is within our project area and where they are based solely off of demographic indicators and data. So we rely heavily on going out, surveying, sending mail survey forms, all that kind of good stuff. And the EPA, as it stands right now, is really only concerned with two key demographic characteristics, which is minority and low income. Now, I don't know if that's going to change as they're updating their guidance with this new administration. Obviously, is going to put some more thought into this process. So it's hard to say, but as it stands, those are the two key demographic indicators that we're looking for in terms of our project development. And we use, or we will be using our bridge data miner, which is a tool developed by the KYTC GIS staff for Bridge in Kentucky. But they uploaded all of this demographic data for me. This is a really intuitive tool. If you've ever used EJ Screen or ArcGIS, it works essentially the same way. You can go, you can add any kind of layers that are available to the public through any of the EPA's websites or anything like that. So this has our low income. It also has minority within somewhere. But it also includes some things that we really should be looking at and what we're going to attempt to look at in more depth. Not just these two indicators, but these additional ones: linguistically challenged, low English proficiency, people over the age of 65, less than a high school degree. All these things are important to determine who are these people that are living here and how is this going to affect them. This tool is also pretty cool in terms of you can see any of our current SYP or 6-year plan projects. So this can be used in conjunction with our demographic data. You can change the transparency and all that good stuff. And you can see where we have active projects, where we have projects that have been built, and future projects. So all of this stuff is incredibly useful for making this preliminary analysis. This is much more detailed than what EJ Screen offers. So our hope is that this is going to streamline this process and make it a little bit easier to make a determination. And you can find this bridge data miner if you go to the KYTC homepage. It's under Maps and Resources. It's right there. It's super easy to find. And some targeted methods just for identifying EJ populations. Again, there's no one-size-fits-all approach to this. In a state like Kentucky, where a lot of low-income people live within the entire state, the minority populations tend to live in the more concentrated metropolitan areas. So again, when you're looking at block group data, it's really hard to determine who's living within that group. As I'm sure you know, you can get onto any data viewer and you'll see that there are maybe 1,000 block groups in Louisville. And then if you go out to Owsley County, there's one. So it's really hard to determine where exactly everybody is within the project area. So that's why we rely on local knowledge and public input through our meaningful engagement. We go out and conduct some field surveys, some drive-by windshield surveys, just to see, if we need to do some more analysis. We rely on some historic data. If there has been any kind of baseline study done within our project area, we can refer back to that and update it with local public officials and the local community. We want to conduct interviews to find out what is the main focus and what the community wants. So interviews, focus groups, and public meetings and feedback. Throughout the project, there will be public meetings, there will be public hearings. And so if anybody has a chance at those points to give feedback to the project, but we want to make sure that we're not limiting it to just those interactions. We want to reach out to whomever may be concerned about our project. When we're talking about impacts, they can be quantitative or qualitative. You can get online and find out all the demographic data and everything. But really what we want to stress is the qualitative aspect of it. We're talking about things like aesthetic value to the community, disruption of community cohesion, and this big one here, interdependencies. If there is somebody that lives within the project area that relies on somebody else to come and give them medication, to give them a ride to work, we want to make sure that we're not disrupting any of those things if somebody falls within our EJ population determination. So we want to consider any and all potential impacts. And again, this is a one-size-fits-all approach. This is project specific, so it's up to the analyst to make these determinations. A quick chart about adverse impacts. Again, the public engagement in the discussion is key. Any adverse impacts, these are some, these are not all of them, but these are the big ones. Denial of benefits, soil, air, water pollution, bodily impairment, noise and vibration. I'm sure everybody driving in today saw the noise barriers up on the highway. That's important to our work. The displacement of people. Relocations is a huge part of this. If someone's not willing to relocate and they are considered an EJ population, then what do we do? And again, impacts the community cohesion. Some other possible adverse impacts, increased traffic congestion and separation of individuals within a given community. Something to note is that adverse impacts can sometimes be temporary. So that will go into the decision-making process. If it will be resolved by the end of the process, then there's no need to do any extra work until you need to. And so EJ determinations are based on effects, not the population size. So again, if we have someone living within our project area that's going to be disrupted by our project, just using our preliminary analysis tool is not going to give you enough information to know exactly in what manner we're affecting that community. So when we make our determination of disproportionately high and adverse impacts, we're really conducting a burden versus benefit analysis. All of our adverse effects can be considered, or when compared to benefits, they can outweigh each other. Again, though, it's specific. If we are going to be taking someone's home, we have to make sure that it's a home of equal value and it's within a location that suits the person whose house is being taken. So we look at all of these kinds of things. If, for instance, we can improve the air quality with our new roadway projects. Doesn't seem like it, but that does happen. It can decrease travel times, all of these things, increase property values, all these things are something to consider when making a determination of high and adverse impacts. And so when we talk about high and adverse, disproportionately high and adverse effects, what it really means is that the EJ population, are they predominantly bearing these adverse impacts? If an EJ community within the project area has 5 or 6 houses being taken, is the neighborhood next door, did we move our alignment because, you know, this is a less desirable area to live? And so will the EJ population, is it appreciably more severe or greater in magnitude than the adverse effect suffered by non-EJ population? So some questions to consider when determining if a project is disproportionately high and adverse. Some questions to ask is whether the adverse effects on EJ populations exceed those borne on non-EJ populations, whether cumulative or indirect effects would adversely affect an EJ population. We do look at cumulative effects. So over time, you know, is there going to be any sort of runoff from the project? There are going to be long-term effects in terms of increased traffic from freight vehicles, all that kind of stuff. And whether mitigation and enhancement measures will be taken for EJ and non-EJ population. If we have a disproportionately high and adverse effect, we are going to have some sort of mitigation strategy. So that will be a key part in the determination of a high and adverse impact. And whether there are offsetting benefits, again, it's kind of up to the analyst to determine what an offsetting benefit may or may not be. So once we've made our determination of high and adversely disproportionate, we get into the mitigation. Something I want to stress again is mitigation, but we don't want to stop with the mitigation that we decide to go with. We want to monitor it throughout, you know, however long this community is going to be living in the area. I'm sure everybody knows of the Newtown Pipe project in Lexington. They put together a coalition of people, community leaders, local officials, and as it stands, they still have that in place. So we want to try and come up with a long-term solution. So again, the community is very important throughout this process. They have to be involved if we're going to have disproportionately high and adverse effects. They must be notified. Again, as I'm sure everybody knows, the building of interstates and highways in this country has a very divisive past. We don't want that to happen. So we want to consult the community. We also have to consult FHWA. Anytime we have an adversely high and disproportionate impact, it's really the same as the NEPA process and determining your environmental document. There are different levels. We conduct our burden versus benefit analysis. Again, this is key. So if there are some benefits, are they going to be long-term benefits? Are they going to be short-term benefits? Some potential mitigation measures include, but are not limited to, visual screening, improved lighting, improved pedestrian infrastructure, available relocation opportunities, enhanced community interaction and education, adjusted construction phasing. That would be pretty rare, but that is there. noise reduction measures, landscaping, aesthetic and environmental benefits, multimodal transport or transit amenities, bus routes, bike paths, all that kind of stuff. The rehabilitation of community amenities. If we do disrupt any sort of, if we're going to have an impact on a park and we ruin the park's aesthetic value, then we have to go in and make sure we remediate that. And this last one is reduced costs for tolls. This is something that we don't really deal with much in our state, but reading through Indiana and a couple other states, they have an agreement where if you are considered to be one of these populations, you don't have to pay tolls. And that is all that I have. Any questions? Thanks everyone for deciding to come to this as the last presentation of your day. I hope everyone has a great rest of their day and a great rest of the conference. Thank you. That worked out.
Yeah. That was different.
No, I didn't know.